Hey, Amber, welcome to Hope Stream. This is such a fun episode, and I kind of can't believe we haven't done it yet. It's a little embarrassing, like how many years I've been doing this and you've been doing your channel, but I am so thrilled to have you. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, we were running in the same circles for sure.
For sure,
Yeah,
for sure. And it's a pretty little circle, you know?
that's right. Yeah.
Like, there's not a whole ton of people who want to do what we do. People are always like, oh, but like you have your quote unquote competitors on the podcast. I'm like, I don't think that exists in our world because
I know, you're
there's
right.
just not enough of us helping parents in particular. And I know you help people, other family members and
Mhm.
also the people who are struggling. But anyway, welcome. Thrilled to have you. Love your channel. Love everything you do. Um, why don't we I don't really have a lot on your background, and I would
Okay.
love to just get a quick glimpse of that to give everybody, like, a little grounding in how in the world did you end up in this field? Because I ended up through my son, but let's hear a little bit about you, and then we're gonna dive into a bunch of stuff.
Absolutely. So I got into the field that I'm in, which I'm an addiction counselor, but I got into it in a non-traditional way. I feel like most of the people that do what I do, they got here because they're in personal recovery, and I did not get here that way. I came from a very addicted family, as in grandparents, parents, sister,
Mhm.
tons of step parents. It was just everywhere. My mom died of methamphetamine related
Hmm.
issue. It was just everywhere. And I would love to say that that's why I got in the field because doesn't that just sound like a romantic story? But it's not. I actually, landed in the field and didn't realize how not normal that was until I was in the field, and then I was like, "Oh, that's that?" Which I know sounds, like, ridiculous, but when you live it every day and you haven't known anything else, you don't even think a thing about it.
Right.
That's my personal background. Once I landed in the field, one of the first jobs I got right out of I say when I was like a baby counselor, right out of grad school. I had been a school teacher before, and I worked in this hospital. It's where I did my internship, and they hired me, and they because I had taught high school, they said, "Well, you've dealt with high schoolers. We want you to develop and run this program for teenagers that have drug problems." And so I was like,
You're
that's
like,
literally the deep end, like, the hardest possible work. I didn't know it at the time. I know it now. It's, like, the hardest possible work ever.
"Yeah,
And, of course, because I was a baby counselor, I didn't want anyone to know I didn't know what I was doing, so I definitely wasn't gonna let on, and I was like, "Yeah, let's do it. I got it. Bring it on."
love that."
And and then I find myself sitting in a room with, I don't know, 8 to 15 teenagers at a time at night, 3 hours at a time, trying to figure out what to do with these addicted teenagers, most of which who had just come out of, like, the inpatient setting because something had really went bad awry,
Yeah.
and they were sort of what they call stepping them down into this level of care, and then I had to figure out what to do. I had no idea what to do. When you go to counseling school, I know you think, "Oh, they teach you that in counseling." They do not. You get one class on addictions, which pretty much involves go to sit in on a couple of 12-step meetings and write a reflection paper.
Oh,
That's
boy.
about it. I've got yeah. So here I am in the room with these teenagers. I'm trying to act like I know what I'm doing, even though I really don't. Don't want anyone to know that. I'm trying to get them to show up because if they don't show up, then I'm going to be found out that I don't know what I'm doing by my bosses, so I'll lose my job. And so my whole mission was just to get these kids to show up mostly at first. And so I got pretty good at that. And then I got them to at least enjoy coming. I made it the motto of our group was sort of like, we like you more than they like you, meaning myself and the other kids in here, we like you more than your using friends like you. Cause that was the competition, right?
Oh, I like it.
In this room and talk to these people, or am I going to go hang out with my friends? That's tough competition, let me tell you. So that was the thing is trying to get these kids to see we're interested in them, we care, we're listening to them, and that worked pretty good, and so I developed this mentor program because these kids, they were coming and they liked coming, and then I didn't wanna see them go when they finished their time, and so I decided to let them keep coming for free as long as they wanted to, as long as they wanted to help other kids and they weren't, like, causing trouble or, being a bad influence. So then I had all these mentors coming, and that was, like, wonderful because I already won them over, so they would just tell the new kids, like, "She's alright." And
Mm.
then this made my job easier and easier. And so even though I really didn't have a lot of knowledge about, it wasn't like I had fancy addiction strategies or whatever, but the fact that these kids liked coming, and then they all wanted to be mentors, they knew they had to get sober to do that, so they just got sober to do it. And the whole system, like, worked quite well, actually. And I feel like that's how I learned that relationship is the key. The relationship is the leverage. It's not about telling people how to get sober. It's about building a relationship with someone to motivate them to wanna get sober. There's tons of treatment out there that'll tell you how to do it, but the problem is the people coming in treatment don't wanna do it. We're gonna have to back up, 10 notches to figure out how to get people to want to get sober, and so I kinda learned that on accident that way, but I'm so glad that I did because it served me really well, and not only does that work with teenagers, that just works with people in general. So that was my first big lesson in this whole thing.
I love that so much because I think you could have spent years and years and years with all kinds of fancy frameworks and theories, and not that those aren't helpful. I'm sure that they really are.
Mhm.
However, at the most basic level, especially with teens,
Mhm.
is that relationship because that is so important to them at that stage of having somebody who accepts them,
Uh-huh.
somebody who's going to hang out with them and not lecture them. I'm sure you weren't giving them a lot of lectures.
Right.
And they responded. I think that's really, really insightful.
Right, and especially with teenagers, the thing they're looking for is connection with peers. It's connection. And a lot of times they fall into the drugs because that becomes a way to be accepted or have friends or fall into a certain group. And so really for most teens, they're really chasing the peer connection more than the drugs. It's just that the drugs is the way to get there, and eventually they do them long enough that then it is a drug problem, and then we have a whole another level of issue. Right.
Yeah, yeah, and it's, for especially for kids, at least what we see is the kids who have some confidence problems, maybe they've got some learning differences or whatever it is that they don't just
Mhm.
kind of naturally, like, fit in with the cool kids, whoever those are,
Right.
that
Right.
substances are the fastest and surest way, for the most
Right.
part.
Yeah.
Like, you're in, like Flynn, right? There you go, you're
Right.
in.
Yeah, somebody says, "Hey, man, you smoke," and this person says, "Yeah, man, I smoke," and now we're friends. You don't have to have things in common other than that. You don't have like, it is the easiest way to find a peer group when you're in middle school or high school.
Yeah, for sure. Have you seen, because you've been at this for a while, right? Like, if I do the math right, about 15 years, is that right?
More than 20. I've been
More
doing
than
it a
20.
while.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm curious because I've only been I'm in, like, year 6, so
Same.
I'm a baby. I'm in the baby position compared to you, but what have you seen in those 20 years when it comes to young people? Because I am sure you see trends. Like, what has changed and what hasn't changed?
As far as, like, drug use is concerned,
Drug
or
use, kind of just overall mental health or what they're struggling with or how they're responding to your services. I just ask out of curiosity because
yeah.
I've only been in it for, like, a minute.
I mean, I feel like as far as young people and what they're struggling with and what they wanna talk about, I mean, I just feel like that stays kinda the same, probably the same things you and I were just talking about as a teenager, there are drug trends that tend to come and go as far as what's popular and what's in. Most of what I see in my office is alcohol, marijuana, and opiates. I mean, yeah, there's other things, but those are the big 3. And with teens, the marijuana is huge, and the one interesting thing as far as, like, what's changed is, used to when I was first in the field, kids would come in and they'd say, "Marijuana is not addictive, it's not even a drug, blah, blah, blah." And that was before, like, the vape pens and everything. And one piece of good news is, well, first of all, the addiction to marijuana has gone up, but the piece of good news is that they recognize that it's an addiction and that they are addicted and they can be addicted. Because now, because of vape pens, it's like people use marijuana all day, every day, like you would smoke cigarette.
Yes.
I mean, it's a whole so I rarely have, a young person come and do the whole "it's not addictive" thing. I used to have to deal with that spiel 10 times a day. I'm at least grateful for that.
Right, right. Yeah, that's what we see too is those 3, and to some degree, the stimulants like ADHD meds that are getting, diverted from the
Mhm.
kid who's supposed to be taking them, but found out that he can sell them and now is making money off of his ADHD.
Yeah. Believe it or not, I've only in my whole 20 years, I've probably treated 3 or 4 people for stimulant addiction, kids and adults combined. No, I'll see that they get misused, especially among, like, teenagers and college kids, but I don't run into a lot of, like, "This is the addiction I'm coming to you for."
Yeah.
Surprising, but true.
Yeah, it is. Well, and it's always seems to be, a mixture. So I'm sure it's probably for you too. Just it's rare to see somebody with just one
True.
substance. So okay, well that's interesting. Yeah, and the struggles are probably the same. Even though it seems that we see a lot more anxiety and depression after COVID of kids, who are sitting at home and doing all of that. But I think being a teenager is still being a teenager. Like
Right.
a lot of insecurity, there's a lot
Mhm.
of self-doubt and all of that, and then now that's just magnified with social media. I mean, I can't imagine if I would have had Instagram when I was a teenager, I don't know, I think I would have
Well,
been
now if you
broken.
do something bad or embarrassing, it never goes away. Everyone yeah, I mean, yeah,
No,
it's
it
hard.
doesn't, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Well, unless you're on I think it's Snapchat that is still has the one
Oh,
that disappears, but if it's bad enough, people will,
mhm.
find it and track it down, so
That's right.
that's super tricky. So, while I have you, I am really excited to tap into a couple of things related less to kids and teens but really thinking about spouses and partners
Mhm.
because we don't really do that at Hope Stream. We're really focused on parents. And I know that a lot of the parents are dealing with a spouse or partner who is
Mhm.
struggling with addiction. And so this I would imagine just magnifies the complication because you've got a kiddo who's struggling, you've
Mhm.
got another adult in the house who maybe has paved the way,
Right.
and you're trying to use a lot of these tools that you teach and that we teach to navigate that, and it just makes my head want to explode. But I wanna talk about the invisible intervention because I know
Mhm.
that you have really knocked it out of the park. Like, we talk about natural consequences and things like that, but you have
Mhm.
really developed a program around that. So is that a tool that you would recommend for somebody listening who's like, "I'm getting it at both ends. Help me out."
Yeah. Yes. In fact, everything that we teach in the invisible intervention, um, they're not I mean, you can use these techniques on helping anybody you have in your life that maybe is stuck in a bad pattern needs to change, like maybe your best friend's dating a jerk ball or something like that, and you kinda want her to figure that out or something, you know? It's just this is a way to interact with someone to help them see maybe difficult things and help them have the courage to address those things. We just use it for addiction, but you can use it these skills that we teach anywhere,
Yeah.
any kind of situation like that. Mhm.
Yes. And a question kind of from a programmatic standpoint, like, where do you suggest people start if they have both a spouse or a partner in the home and a child? Like, what do you recommend? Are you like blanket trying to help everybody, or should you like it feels like they're the first responder and it's like, who do I go to first? Like what would you say in that situation?
That's a really hard question because as a parent, I think your gut instinct is gonna be to protect your child first and foremost, which I agree with. However, if you don't have the other parent on board, whether the other parent has an addiction or not, just if they're not on board, you're not gonna get anywhere with this child. Because as long as the 2 parents are not lined up, the addiction will thrive. So, as much as I hate to say it, I feel like you have to work on getting that other parent on board because you're just not gonna get anywhere with a kid because 'cause they'll just split you, they'll just play one of you against the other, you got good cop, bad cop, all the things, and you're just I just don't know that you're going to get anywhere when you have another parent that's not lined up.
Yeah, and they do know. It's like when they're 2 and they already know, like, how to manipulate and, "Well, I'm gonna go to mom for this and for that."
We all know that. We know which teacher's going to let us get about this. I mean, that's natural, of course.
And really, what have you seen work well for trying to get parents closer? Maybe they're not on the same page, but maybe they're at least in the same chapter. Like, maybe they
Yeah.
start in 2 different books.
Hmm.
Like, I'm in the hardcore, they just need to get it together, get your
Hmm.
act together, shape up, and then you've got the other parent who's like, "Well, actually, I kinda like this motivational stuff, and I really like, natural consequences." And what do you see that can start to help bring them closer together?
What I find is when you have two parents, usually you have a good guy and a bad guy. And I don't mean one of you's good and one of you's bad. I just mean perceived by the child as like the good cop, bad cop,
Yeah.
basically. And what I like to reframe that as is one of you, the bad cop, is probably really good at seeing the truth. Like,
Mm.
you have a radar, like, nothing gets by you, you know what's up, like, you're not falling for that manipulation, whatever, right? But that one is usually not good at interacting with the kid because they see through all that, they know exactly what's up, and they just wanna call it out, argue with it, and do all the wrong things. So, that one, I say, you're I'm calling you Batman, like, you're playing the outfit right here, and your job is to be in the know, right? And the other one, usually the good cop, usually has more denial about what's happening, but has better skill as far as interacting with the kid. So
Mm.
I try to say, okay, we're going to be a team. The the one that interacts with the kid has to trust the other one's judgment because their judgment's probably pretty spot on. Okay, they got a radar. You just need to trust them that what they say is happening is probably happening. And that one has to trust the other one to be the front communication person. And so we can use these 2 differing opinions as different teammates, like, a catcher and a pitcher or whatever. Now we can see, okay, you have a skill and I have a skill, and we're gonna teamwork the situation.
I love the tag team idea because you're right, and the quote unquote bad cop, the one who's seen more of the truth, um, totally nailed it. They're usually not the one that can then very strategically and compassionately communicate because they're
Because their
just
alarms are screaming in their head, like, and they're just like, you know yeah.
yes, and that also really holds true if that parent is also struggling with some substance use or maybe a gambling addiction because they are really looking at a mirror of themselves. And A, that's painful,
Mhm.
and it allows them to see it much more clearly. And I was definitely the one who was in denial
Okay.
until I wasn't. And then
Mhm.
because
Right,
it hit
right.
me flat in the face, like when the police are in your living room, it's kind of hard to deny anymore.
Yeah.
But I was living in denial, like, oh, my son couldn't do this, or he couldn't do that, or maybe he's just drinking a little bit here and there. And I was doing it with an ex-spouse, was
Mhm.
like, this is what's going on.
Yeah,
So
they're like, "You need to wake up, like, this is" yeah.
yes,
Mhm.
but I think that's a great way because you can both honor each other's strength and say, "This is your strength, and I need that,"
Mhm.
and vice versa, so that you're not just because otherwise it's just this power struggle and this
Right.
battle, and kids watching like, "Okay, while y'all are over there battling it out about who agrees with who and who doesn't, I'm gonna be over here
Doing what
and I'm
I'm doing.
doing what I'm
Right.
doing."
Right. Exactly. And it's interesting in your story, Brenda, because almost always it's mom that's bad cop and dad that's good cop in the families, at least.
Really?
Because a lot of times dads have this like boys will be boys or like I
Right.
did that too. But what's interesting is sometimes what's happening there really is that the one that's getting the alarms usually isn't handling it very well, to be honest.
Mhm.
They're fighting with the kid a lot about it, and they're trying to control it, which is a natural reaction.
Yeah.
And, the other parent can see that that's not helping, and that's not working. And so they try to soften the blows or mediate, And the way they try to do that with the other parent is to be like, it's probably not that bad. And so they're minimizing it, thinking they're trying to get the other parents' alarms to calm down and for them to
Right.
interact differently. But that makes the other parent feel like you don't get it. And then they just have more alarms. So it's just like understanding where each other's coming from and why this good cop, bad cop dynamic happens. Because if you're not careful, then the good cop knows things and they won't tell the other one because it's like, that's going to start a fight. It's going to make it worse. Then we secret keeping, also thing.
Yes, I am going to tuck that in my back pocket because it is so true, and not just with substance use. So I think that's a
Right.
really,
Yeah.
really good tip to remember. One thing that we see a lot that I would love to get your thoughts on is the kids, and this tends to be a little bit when they're earlier in their use, but even if they're experiencing some pretty bad consequences, the kids will say to the parents, I'm fine. I don't have a problem. Everything's
Mhm.
fine. Like, yeah, I got kicked off the soccer team, but I don't like soccer anyway. Or, yeah, whatever. I'm not going to go to that college, but whatever. I'm just going to go to community college. And these are usually the ones that are using daily, like THC daily,
Mhm.
really struggling, and the parents are pulling their hair out because they're like, how do you not see that your life is crumbling?
Mhm.
And what I don't ever know is, does the kid really think there's no problem? Or can they acknowledge inside of them, yeah, there's some problems going on, but there's no way in hell I'm going to admit to my parents that I've got a problem. Like, what do you see
It's
with
in
this?
the middle. It's in the middle. Like, there's some things about it that they don't like and they feel bad about, but they probably wouldn't say, like, "I'm an addict."
Right.
And whatever part of them does see an issue with it is definitely not gonna admit it to mom and dad. So, it's both. It's both.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. That I think it's the whole word addict. It's an
Mhm.
interesting word. I would love to hear what you think about it. I don't like it. I never called my son an addict. I didn't like labeling him. However, what I find interesting is that many people who are now in recovery will say, "Oh, I'm an addict. Oh, I'm an addict through and through," right? They use that term almost as a badge.
Yeah.
And I find it I just don't use it because I don't feel comfortable labeling people. How do you look at that word?
That's a great question. It's sort of controversial
Yeah.
topic. Now,
Yeah.
I I do use the word, and here's why I use the word. When people are in recovery and they're using the word, they're not wearing it as a badge, they're reminding themselves that they can't
Mhm.
manage. That's why they do that, they say that over and over meanings because when you have an addiction that's constantly trying to trick you, I call it the "it'll be different this time." If I just do it this way, I just do it on odd days and not even days, if I just, stand on
Yep.
my head and you're trying to find a loophole.
Mm.
And when people are resistant to calling themselves addicts, family members wanna think, "Oh, it's because of stigma." It's not. The reason people are resistant to calling themselves addicts is because they know that that means they have to stop completely. Because everyone knows that. Like, if I'm an addict, that means I can't manage this and I gotta stop. So when people are resistant to saying that, most of that resistance is about not wanting to accept they need to stop completely. So that's why you hear people say, "I'm an addict," or alcoholic or whatever, so often it's like a reminder of, like, I have this
Mhm.
here, and if I go back to it, it's gonna cause this problem. Now, um, that's just the way I personally feel about it. Sometimes people are resistant to it because of a stigma or something, but a lot of times, they're not gonna say this to you, but secretly, they wanna say, "I'm a problem drinker,"
Yeah.
which in their mind, really what that means is, "I can rein it back."
Mm.
Yeah.
Interesting. That is really interesting. Yeah. I can see that. I kind of relate it to, like, I'm a diabetic,
Mhm.
and I have to, like, that's just the truth. Like, I'm a
Mhm.
diabetic. I need to take my insulin, or I need to eat a certain way, or whatever it is.
Right.
So I really appreciate that because it is such a controversial thing. And I think those of us maybe who are not in recovery make it more of a controversy than those who are.
I really think that's true because the people that worry about it is usually not the people that have it, it's the family members. And it's that protective, which I get. But the other reason, I guess, why people that are in recovery don't have an issue with it, and why I don't have an issue with it is because I don't have a negative stigma attached to my head with the word. All my favorite people in recovery. So when I hear the word or think the word, I don't have a bad thought. And when you're in recovery and all your friends are, you don't have the bad thought either,
Right.
if that
Oh,
makes sense. Yeah.
no, it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that I think we can spend a lot of time debating it, and it's probably really not as much worth the time that we spend debating it as just letting people use whatever language feels okay to them. But there is, there's like courses that you can take on language and, stigmatization, which is great.
Mhm.
Um, if that's what you need. But anyway, I was just curious about that. And I'd be curious too, because I know that you teach, I don't know if you teach the craft approach, like true craft. We don't
Mhm.
necessarily teach like craft in a structured, like
Mhm.
you are going to sit down and learn craft, but we teach all of the principles. And I know that there's also one of those other, like sticky words is rock bottom. Like
Yeah.
this like we have this love affair with these rock bottom stories. If you're watching Intervention or you're watching whatever, it's like, oh, that was their rock bottom. How do you
Mhm.
think about that?
That's a great question. I think waiting for rock bottom is quite dangerous, actually. It's a mistake. Um, People don't have to hit rock bottom. They do have to get uncomfortable. The cons have to start to outweigh the pros. That's true. There has to be some consequences. And I can talk more about this, but they need to be natural consequences because a lot of family members, parents particularly, they confuse consequences and punishment. And so the easy way to think about that is if you dole it out, it's a punishment in their mind. If the world doles it out, it's a consequence. And if the world gives a consequence and then you dole out something on top of it, now all they can see is the punishment. So we can talk as much about that as you want to, but um, you do need those consequences to be in place for them to be like, this isn't working for me. But the idea of hitting bottom doesn't really line up with what we know about addiction because the definition is continuing to use or behavior despite the consequence. I mean, people lose everything. People lose their freedom. People are on the street. They lose their kid. They lose their job. They lose their spouses. They lose their dignity. They lose everything. And they still use. So this idea of if I make someone uncomfortable enough, they're going to wake up. And I do think that, like I said, I do think there needs to be a level of uncomfortableness, but um, when people lose everything, it's really hard to bring them back from. Like, for example, once someone does live on the streets, it's really hard to motivate them back because they actually just get comfortable with it.
Yeah.
So there's a level of consequence when it goes when it goes really far. It's just that what happens is they just accept it. Like, they just accept, like, I'm just an addict. Like, this is who I am. This is my destiny. Like, I'm just gonna drink till I die. I'm just gonna like, they just roll with it. So it's in my mind, the formula for helping someone get out of it is kind of a combination of the natural consequences, the uncomfortable, met with, a level of hope and positive influence. And when we get that combination right, people are much more likely to make a different choice.
Yeah, I agree. I think rock bottom, what I tend to refer to as a turning point because I've heard
Mhm,
so many, and I'm sure, you're actually dealing with people who are the ones who are struggling, the kind of identified
mhm,
patient. So you probably have tons of stories, but I've just heard enough stories on this podcast of people who say, you know, um, I woke up and I realized I forgot to put my kids' presents out for Christmas. And
mhm.
that was it. That was a turning
That was
point.
it.
So that
Right.
doesn't feel like some dramatic,
Mm.
Netflix worthy,
Right.
rock bottom. Like
Right.
that's a
Exactly.
turning point, and that can come in so many different formats. Have you heard
Right.
things like that?
Yes, I call it like it's right after something crappy happens, you have a moment of clarity. And that could be something big or something small. And what usually happens is you have a bunch of moments of clarity. You hit a bunch of little bottoms. You just kind of like scrape along the bottom for a while. Some of those things are worse than other things. But what happens is you hit a bottom and you think, oh my gosh, I'm never going to do that again. but you convince you're like, I'm not going to get a DUI again, but I can still drink and do this. So you're kind of figuring it out along the way. And then eventually you just hit so many of those little moments of clarity that you have a bigger moment, not because something bigger happened, but because, you know what, this just don't work. Gotta try something else.
Yes.
Yeah. And a lot like in 12 step, they say, like, I'm just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And really that the thing more than like this huge external consequence. It's more of an internal feeling of like two things. One, I can't control this very well, or at least not consistently. And I don't like who I am. The bad things that happen to us, we can blame other people or situations or circumstances. But when we come to terms with, man, I just don't like who this makes me, then something changes.
That's really true. What you just said about blaming external things or people,
Hmm.
especially with young people, teens or college age kids, we see that it's just universal, right? And it's probably just universal with addiction, but the kids are really able
Right.
to, it's my teacher's fault, it's my coach's fault, it's my parents' fault, it's my whatever's fault. How do
Hmm.
you counteract that? Like, if you're the parent and you're listening and it's always somebody else's fault, it's always the whatever.
Hmm.
And what do you say to that? Like, what is a good response to a kid who is constantly putting it out on somebody else? This is somebody else's thing. This is somebody else's fault.
Well, I got two pieces of that. There's a piece of it, if it's you they blame, I have a whole, we can talk about that. But like, let's say you're just having a conversation, they made a bad grade or whatever, and they're blaming someone else, not you. Um, the best thing to do actually is just respond with an empathy statement. Because whatever they're saying to you, they're saying from a defensive standpoint, most likely. I mean, yes, they lack some insight, but mostly it's defensiveness. And like if they're complaining about their teacher, just say something like, yeah, she is kind of a tough teacher. Or, yeah, I really had a hard math teacher too, man. I hated it. And what happens is that creates a safety. It actually activates the part of their brain that lets them learn. So when you don't like come at them and try to like get them to see the other side, and you just if you just see their side, then it's almost like a reflex. Then they start seeing the other points. But I could have tried harder too. Like they may not take full, and they may not admit it to you just because they don't want to give you the satisfaction, but they will think about their part of it.
Yes, that's great. That's the classic motivational interviewing reflection,
Yeah.
right? Or affirmation.
Hmm.
Which is so powerful. It's so, so powerful. And I do that all the time, like in my just regular adult relationships when somebody says, "Oh, that's so unfair." And it's like, I know, sucks.
Yeah.
It just
Right.
it takes all the air out of that defensiveness, that wanting to come
Hmm.
back. So that's
Hmm.
real, and it's so hard to do in the moment, right? When you're so
Especially with the kid.
oh my gosh, it's so
Because when
hard.
you don't feel a responsibility to teach your friend these lessons. You feel a responsibility to make sure your kid, turns to a responsible person or whatever. So there's this way bigger urge. I mean, yeah, it's tough.
It is, and I think also we think that if we do that, if we come back with a reflection or affirmation, that means that we are agreeing with them,
Oh, yeah. I'm letting
right?
them get away with it. Right.
Yeah, like I have to hit back with that. Like I have to come back with my knowledge and well, no, this doctor said this or this, like we think we have to come back with an answer and it's just so hard to not do that, which makes
Mhm.
me want to ask you about ego. Like
Mhm.
ego and shame, because I think those are things that maybe don't get talked about enough. Like we have all these tools and we have motivational interview and we have craft and we have all these things. But when, like, I think of my son, he had so much anger and so much pride. Like, I am the best Xanax dealer in all of Seattle or whatever. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like he took a lot of pride in what he was doing. And he was like,
Mhm.
I can handle it. I can do all of this. And I don't know that he would have ever kind of been able to dismantle his ego enough to say, Mom, I need help.
Oh, yeah.
And at the
Right.
same time, I'm sure he was feeling a lot of shame because he knew what he was doing. Talk to me about that. Like I just never really talk about that very much.
It's complicated because you have the ego and shame of the person, you're a kid in this instance, and your own ego and shame. So what you're fighting against is your own ego and shame, mostly as a parent, to feel like, like mom guilt. Like I have to, like, if my kid is doing something bad, it means I'm a bad parent, and all of that. Our own ego and shame is the thing most likely to prompt us to maybe make a less effective response.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
honest. Once we can understand that it's our defense mechanisms mixed with their defense mechanism, you understand how that works psychologically, you can kind of like sidestep it a little bit. Like when you're talking about that, I see a lot of or have seen a lot of young people that are like that. And what I'll say to them, I'll say, you're like a badass entrepreneur. Yeah, you're meant to be a businessman. Like, I like the way you think. And then I'll say, the right business. Like, and I've literally with kids like sit down, okay, how much do you make selling this weed? Do you drive? They come to you. Do you have to answer your phone all the time? Like, are you on call? And like, we like run the numbers.
I
Okay.
love it.
I'm like, okay, but you know you're gonna get like arrested a time or two. You know you're gonna get like somebody's gonna steal your stuff a time or two. Like, let's put all this in our ROI here, okay? Like, is this our best business? Or could we make more money selling Nikes? Or could we make more money doing something else? And so I honestly sort of play into it and just see what they're saying. Cause like when you're telling that story about your son, I'm thinking if you sit mom, I'd be like, dude, you're crafty. Like you're ambitious. I
Yeah.
loved it. Let's make
Mhm.
something. Like,
Yes.
and that's
Yes.
the way
I could just
I
see it. You need to come out with an Amber's ROI calculator. Sure. Right. And through like, okay, but your legal defense is going to cost this much. And then you're going to miss, 2 to 3 years while you're in jail. So then you got to make sure you have a backup entrepreneur that's going to run your business well. But that is genius. I
yeah,
love
I'm
that.
like, okay, they're paying you $20 for this weed. You're driving. Like, okay, hold on, hold on.
Do you know how
Like,
much gas costs right now?
do you have this in your QuickBooks? Nothing else.
Yes. Well, and what I do know is that our kids who get themselves into this are usually brilliant,
Mhm.
over functioning, right? They are
Mhm.
usually highly gifted in some area. So they've
Yep.
got this like intelligence that is surpasses what where they should be, and also kind of a restlessness of like school is boring, like everything's boring, especially if they have ADHD. And so they do end up in these situations. And we always say, man, if we can just channel that in a better
Right.
direction, imagine how successful you're going to be.
And that's what I do with young people and adults is I say, when we talk about addictive personality disorder, I'm like, really what that is ADD. And I like to call it like entrepreneur personality disorder or
Mhm.
like successful personality because you're really driven and you're really like, I'm not going to give up and you can solve any problem to make it happen. You're just misusing your superpower. It's the way I think about it. Like, man, if we took that and put it over here or into this, into that, wow, that would be really cool. Like, think how successful you'd be and you would like yourself for it. And right now you don't really like yourself.
And you might not end up in jail because that would suck, or end up in jail again.
Yeah, or at least you would be arguing with your wife or your mom. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. It
Mhm.
is so true. They are so brilliant. And
Mhm.
it's just so frustrating when they're young, and there's some degree of just letting that prefrontal cortex develop, right? If you can
Yeah.
keep them alive long enough, like keep them alive till they're
Yeah.
25, because that's when
Mhm.
things start kind of turning up there. But
Right.
it also turns slower because it's been really, dampened by the substances. And even I remember when my son was like 21 or 22, if I'd have met him, I really would have thought he was maybe like 18 or 19,
Mhm.
because that whole developmental process got halted. And
Right.
so I think that's also really confusing for parents. Like, what should I be expecting? My teen, maybe finally at 20, they're like, okay, I'm not smoking every day. They're doing really well. But then it's like, there's catch up to do, and then the parents don't
Mhm.
know, like, how much should they be doing. So how do you kind of gauge, like, what should they be doing as they're in that early recovery
Mhm.
stage? Because I think maybe as parents, we have much higher expectations than we
Yeah.
should.
Yeah, I think I would put that in 2 categories, like, having a reasonable expectation of them emotionally and psychologically, like, where they're at, like, their coping mechanisms, their responses, and then also, like, a reasonable expectations around, like, responsibilities because and this isn't just with young people, but, like, when someone finally does come out of addiction, the family's usually been holding together all their responsibilities for so long.
Yes.
You're just like, "Okay, it's your turn."
Spoon
And you need to drive and pay the bills, and you need to watch the kids, and you need to, like, blah, 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 and we're ready because they should have been doing that for years, and they haven't. But emotionally and psychologically, they're not there yet, and I know that's not fair. Everything about having an addicted loved one's not fair, so we'll just add it to the list, okay? That's
Right.
also not it's it's like, "I've been paying it for this long, you're telling me I gotta keep paying it a little longer?" I'm like, "Gonna have to keep it a little longer,"
Mhm. Yeah.
because given this person I like to think of it like they're juggling. So you wanna throw them one ball until they juggle that one really well, and then you just wanna handle them give them one more, and then they get those 2 going really well, and then you wanna give them one more when they're ready, and that instead of throwing it all at them, like, you have to have a job, pay rent, you gotta go to 90 meetings in 90 days, you gotta call your sponsor, you gotta be polite to your dad and you gotta clean up your room, you need help with the dishes, you need to mow the yard, and I get that's probably what they should be doing, but if the goal is to get them to be able to manage all those things, we need to give them like one at a time,
Yes.
and they'll get that, and they'll catch up way faster than you think. The emotionality catches up quick. Like it's not like if they're stuck at 16 and they're going to have to take day by day to get there. They'll rapidly catch up to their age group.
I love the juggling analogy because it is so tempting to throw 5 balls at them and then question, "Well, how come you can't just juggle all 5 of them right off the bat if you've never even juggled before?" It's like, "Well, I don't even know what, like, I'm supposed to be doing this." So that's really helpful. I do wanna go back. You talked a little bit about natural consequences, the world consequences versus parents' consequences, which are
Mhm. Mhm.
punishments. Could you talk about that a little bit more? Because this is an area that is so incredibly difficult. It sounds so simple on paper, and it is so difficult to execute, especially around the thing that we see a lot is my kid is smoking in my house or my kid is vaping in my house, and they keep bringing vape pens in and they keep bringing, I'm finding alcohol bottles under their bed or whatever, and
Mhm.
they're trying to figure out what is a natural consequence for that, and what if I allow a natural consequence and they get arrested, right? And they're only 17 and now they're gonna have a record. So I would love to get your thoughts on all of that.
These are really like you're saying, they're really hard decisions that almost any parent is facing if they're in this situation. As much as possible, I think you need to let it play out naturally, which is against your instincts. Like, for example, a really common one is if I find drugs in this house, I'm gonna call the cops or something. First of all, I don't believe you, you're bluffing. That's what I would say to the parent. I'm like, "You're bluffing." And don't bluff because you're gonna get called on that bluff.
Yeah.
Don't do it. And secondly, if you did call the cops because you found the drug, they will not learn the lesson from that. They will literally for the next 10 years be throwing it in your face. "I cannot believe you call the cops on your own son." Like, what kind of mother does that? That's the only lesson they'll learn. If you dole it out, they don't learn the lesson. They just blame you. They just see you as the bad guy and you're the problem, and it distracts them from seeing the real problem. So there are some safety boundaries that you absolutely have to put in place.
Right.
But I would steer clear of if I find it in this house. Like in my dealing with teenagers, they all also smoke cigarettes at the time. I guess these days it would be more vaping or whatever. That was always a thing. And even when I did it in treatment, I did not argue with kids about smoking nicotine. All of them, 15 years old, be out front of the treatment center smoking cigarettes, and I'm like, "Y'all wanna deal with that? I'm not dealing with that." And I would tell the parents up front, "I am not gonna argue with a kid about that. I'm gonna save all my arguing for that other stuff."
Yeah.
Now, if it's cigarette smoke in your house and you don't want it in there because it's, like, smelly, then you need to say, "I don't want you to smoke inside my house." I feel like that's a kind of a reasonable rule because I feel like that's more your side of the street. But if you're trying to tell yourself, "I know my kid is addicted," or husband or anybody, and I know they're addicted to this substance, and you think that they don't have it in your house, you're lying to yourself. It is in your house. 'Cause if you're addicted, you have to have it all the time, and it has to be close. Best case scenario is they have it in their car in your driveway, and they think they've loopholed it, but it is there. So, as far as, like, the rules that you set as few as possible because then you have to back them up, you have to power struggle about it, like,
Mhm.
there are some you have to set, I'm not saying let them do whatever, but this whole, like, trying to set all these rules and then you have to give a punishment for it, because you said, "I'm gonna do this if you do that," or whatever. If a kid makes a bad grade, the bad grade is the consequence. If you yell at them for the bad grade, now they're just focused on the fact that you yell at them or you took their Xbox away or whatever it is that you did.
Right.
Right. Now, one that is the most complicated, I think, for parents is driving. This one is complicated.
Oh, yes.
Right. Because if you have a kid that's struggling with substances and you're knowingly letting them drive your car or their car that's in your name and it's on your insurance, I have seen that come back on parents.
Mhm.
So I do feel like it's appropriate to say, if you're not passing drug screens consistently, like, you're not driving my car
Right.
because it's not on my insurance, and that's for liability reasons.
Mhm.
I've seen parents get sued for that more than once, especially when it's like a known history. I've had parents whose their kid has like wrecked 4 cars in the last 6 months and they're still letting their kid and if they hit someone, that's gonna not be good. So
Yeah.
I would make a consequence around that as far as like the driving, but the rest of it, it's better if it comes from the world.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads me to a question that I had around high functioning. And I know this is usually a term that's applied to adults like, "Oh,
Mhm.
she's a high functioning alcoholic." I think we also have high functioning teenagers and college age kids who seem to be able to use at a dangerous level, and they somehow skirt consequences like magic. And so
Yeah.
that's where I think sometimes we have a lot of parents who they sit their kids down and they say, "If I find it in the house, I'll just throw it away. Like, I'm not
Mhm.
gonna call the cops, but I'm not having it in my house. It's illegal, whatever it is."
Mhm.
And and it seems like that can go on for a really long time sometimes. Like, I know my son, I was like, "When is this kid gonna get arrested?"
I know, right? I know, because the reason isn't really because they're so high functioning. The reason is because the systems, schools, and law, they get so many chances.
Yes, they
I've
do.
got so many parents, "Why can't they fail a class?" Like, they can't fail a class, the teacher won't let them fail. They've literally come to school 2 days the whole year, and the teacher's like, "You're not supposed."
Yeah.
They get pulled over and let off and pulled over and let off, and you're like, and it's a problem because you keep telling them, "You're gonna fail that class. You're gonna get a DUI."
And then they
Get let off because they're teenagers, right? It's so frustrating because it
yes,
does take way longer for those consequences to kick in when it's
yeah.
a young person than you think or want it to. And then you look like a liar, because you've been saying.
Yes, yes,
Mm.
and what about, again, thinking about the parents who are listening who have a spouse or a partner or maybe even a sibling, a parent, and that person seems to be so high functioning, like they're using at a level that is causing some damage, like in the relationship or whatever, in their parenting abilities, but they're
Mhm.
still thriving at work and they're still like they seem to not really be having a lot of consequences. Are there things that you have found that I feel like it would be like ninja level natural consequences? Like, what are things that you could do that maybe you don't think about that would at least start to help them see, like, this actually is a problem? Like, yes, you're, killing it at work and you're still working out and you don't seem to have any health problems. Like, there's so many people like that,
Mhm.
but there's still damage being done. Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, especially with an adult, because adults really can be quite high functioning, and they can function in every area of life except at home. because you can kind of put on your mask and keep it together during the
Yeah.
daytime or whatever, but you can't keep it together all day, and so your spouse is gonna see it first, and that's so frustrating because you see it, no one else sees it, you try to tell other people, they don't believe you, it's just this whole thing. But, the truth of it is deep down inside, there's something they don't like about it. There's some consequences they feel like they're embarrassed about it, they're ashamed of themselves about it, they have let themselves down, they have bad self-esteem. Now you may not see those, and they're probably not gonna talk to you about those, and so you feel like there's no consequences, but there are. And when you can create enough trust with someone, they'll open up with you about that. And then you want to nurture those because those are their reasons to stop. And they're much more powerful. Like what you said again earlier about, like, I forgot to put my Christmas presents out. That is very powerful. And that's this, like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe that. Like, this is so important as a mom and as a family. And that stuff hits home more than anything else. And that's usually already in there.
Right.
If you can be the right kind of place, people will start to, like, admit that to you out
Right.
loud.
That's really interesting because I think I always am a fan of, work on the relationship, work on the
Mhm.
relationship. So while this is going on and they seem to have 9 lives and they never get they never get arrested, they never fail the class, especially during COVID, like they were literally just passing kids just for showing up on Zoom like one day. It was so bad. But while that's going on, trying to focus on the relationships, like you just said, so that when they do have that moment of like, "Oh, I really don't feel good about this, like, this is just terrible," that now you are not the enemy, that you are an
Right.
ally, that they'll be
Mhm.
willing to talk to. So important because that day will come. We always just want it to be today. Like,
Mhm.
could it just be today? But if it's not, then at least work on the relationship.
Right, and you can speed it up by working on the relationship because actually it's already in there. They're
Mhm.
just defensive towards you, and the more you get them, you never wanna say something to somebody that's gonna make them say something back to you that you don't want them to think, like, "You're an alcoholic," and then they think, "No, I'm not. I make a bazillion dollars and I go to work every day and everyone loves me." Never say something to somebody that's gonna put them in a position to defend the other side,
Right.
even think the other side,
Right.
right? And because they're convincing themselves every time they say it or think it, so we don't wanna help them do that.
Yes. That's a
Um,
good psychological trip right there.
yeah.
If
One of the things you can do to help build that credibility is you're trying to get this person to see the problem, and so you're trying to show them how serious it is, and if they're a functioning person or it's not affecting everything, then that's not gonna ring all the way true to them. So one of the most effective things you can do is just acknowledge that. Like, "Look, you gotta work every day, you make a good living, you're still exercising, you're doing all this. I mean, you definitely not way addicted like some of these people, but is it affecting anything? Is there anything you don't like about it?" So just acknowledge it. When most of the time we wanna steer away from that, but that's what they're thinking, and then you lose credibility with them because they think, "You don't get it, you don't see me, you're just focused on this one negative thing," and you lose credibility when you do that. So, if you know they're thinking, "Yeah, but," then just go ahead and say all the "yeah, buts."
I love that.
It's not you don't have a good argument against it, so just roll it.
Right, right. Any other little tricks for speeding things up? Because I know, especially with young people and fentanyl, this is what we see is the parents are frantic because it is, it's not like alcohol takes a bit longer, right? By the
Mhm.
time you get addicted and it's really you could be in your 60s by the
Yeah.
time you're
But
really
fentanyl
impacted
can kill you any one time, right?
instant. So,
Um,
any other tips for speeding up, uh, I guess, what do I wanna say? Like, having them recognize that this is a problem and being willing to think about getting some help.
that it's really hard with fentanyl and especially with your kid because some things safety wise you just have to address no matter what. And it may slow things down for them figuring out, but you have to as a parent. So I get that. I'm gonna acknowledge that first. Um, One of the things we want to do if it's something really serious like that is we want to say, this can kill you. And we think, wow, that's going to get their attention, but it really doesn't work very well. And the reason it doesn't work very well is either they're so young, they just don't really believe you can't really scare kids because they haven't had enough bad things happen to them yet. So it's like, whatever, I can handle my stuff. Like they just don't believe you.
Yeah.
Or they're so far in it that they don't really care, because far in substance abuse is just this what I call like passive suicidality, which is I don't really they live really recklessly and they don't really care if they wake up or not. So the threat of like this could kill you doesn't really, I don't see that make much of an impact.
Right.
And you would think that would be like the ace card, but it really isn't the ace card. Find what their thing is. Maybe their thing is that their girlfriend's mad at them because they're doing it. And you may think, well, that's a dumb reason. You should be concerned because you flunked out of school and you could kill you. It doesn't matter. What is their thing? And grow and nurture that seed. They have a thing. Find it. You know, it's frustrating because it's usually their thing is something you see as dumb. Like I've alcoholic men. They're like, it's really putting some weight on me. I'm like, yeah, you would feel a lot better. Like, yeah, you probably lose some weight. Like whatever their thing, even though they've like lost their marriage or whatever, whatever their thing that they can see, find it and nurture that, because that's their motivator.
Yeah.
And they're going to respond to that faster than they're going to respond to anything that you have to say. And with young people, if they're in a relationship and the relationship's against it, that's big leverage. Oh, like if the boyfriend or girlfriend doesn't like it, man, that's like you want to turn that one. If the boyfriend or girlfriend's in it, you're in trouble.
Mhm.
I mean, you really are in trouble.
Yes, and that is very common, right? They find
But
somebody who also likes to use, or they meet in rehab and then they go back out, and
I
that is
know that is. I mean, I hate to say it, but that's like almost. I said you can get someone off of heroin faster than you can get them out of a bad relationship.
yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
And
that.
yes, and the thing I say to parents about that too is that those relationships usually don't last too long,
Right,
right?
right.
So, yes, it's terrible, and it just keeps them so chained to that substance and to that person. However, those
Mhm.
those relationships don't tend to be the ones that last 40 or 50 years. Maybe it would, but, at that level, you're talking weeks or months because
Especially not with a young person.
yeah,
Right.
it's
And
chaotic.
and that's a good point. And the reason that is because when you're an addict, you're not a very good person to be in a relationship with, even to another addict, because
Mhm.
your loyalty is to the substance. And somebody that's like intoxicated all the time, they just don't make the best partner. So if you're in that situation, which is a bad situation, not only is your kid have this, but they're dating someone, whatever you do, don't go against the other person,
Right.
because they will hang on forever. So whatever you do not align against that other person. And even when they come and they have the first complaint, play it cool. You listen to them, you let them talk about it, you validate it, but do not jump in there and add anything to it, because they're going to get back 3 or 4 times. Now you've done played your card. So don't do that. It's really hard, but don't do it.
So hard. You're just like, oh, I just wish you could see it. But yes, it takes so
Mhm.
much control, so much. And this leads me to my last question because I know I have to let you go, but it does take so much control. And what I'm always telling people is in order to have that level of control, you have to be taking care of yourself. And so
Yeah.
I wonder, because I know how difficult it is to be in a role, and I'm not even supporting people who are, actively using. What do you do for yourself to keep yourself in a position where you can show up every day and do this in all of your videos and all of your
Mhm.
counseling and running a business? And I believe you're a parent, and like,
Mhm.
how do you do it?
Probably the most helpful thing for me is having my expectations right in my head so that I'm not always upset or disappointed, or like most addiction counselors, the average length is 5 years in the field, which is really unfortunate because it takes longer than that to be qualified to be in the field. So,
Mm,
they don't last very long. And the reason is because they get burned out because they're trying to help people who go back out over and over. And then you take it personal, or you feel like, well, they don't even want help, or you feel like it's a reflection of you. And when you get like my expectation about helping people is, especially young people, I don't try to tell myself like I'm gonna tell this person these magic things and they're just never gonna drink or use anything again. My main goal is to make sure they have a good experience with me. That's my number one goal, and I can control that to some degree
Yeah.
because, um, if they, at some point in the future, need help, they're not gonna be scared to either come back to me or go see someone else. So, understanding, like, if I'm dealing with someone who's in complete denial, then my goal is just to try to get them to think about maybe they have a problem. So don't set yourself up for, "I've gotta make this thing happen," and you won't be so dysregulated all the time. Like, you'll feel more in control. That and then for me, I sort of trust the process because I've seen it so many times that it's a little easier for me, and plus it's not my kid. When or if it's ever my kid, I understand that's completely different, but I've seen people come out of this over and over and over again, and I see the stages people go through, and so I kinda know, like, even when I see someone in a bargaining stage, that doesn't mean they're not gonna make it, it just means we're on this step and not this step, like, that helps me too. But it's mostly about your expectations.
Yeah. That's a really, really helpful point because I do think that we tend to see the top of the mountain and we
Mhm.
don't remember that there's lots of zigzags that go up the mountain. And so I
Yeah.
love that thought of like, let's point here at
Mhm.
getting them to just think that maybe there's an issue
Right.
instead of going for the top of the mountain, which is like, oh, they're sober. They're, back in college and they're married and they have a golden doodle. And like we
Yeah,
like
did it right.
make the
Yeah.
craziest expectations and
We get
forgetting that there's
impatient. We want it to
yes.
happen now. That's our big and then we get ourselves frustrated. Like, if you're dealing with someone who's in denial and does not think they have a problem and you're talking to them about going to treatment, you're missing the mark. And you're ruining your credibility and they're thinking, "This idiot," or whatever. So understanding where you're at and where's the next little point. Like when I started, I just want you guys to show up. And when you keep it simple like that, it just tend to stay more level headed about it.
Yes, and pizza usually
Yeah.
helps in a time like that. Like, you
Right.
gotta do what you gotta do, right?
Write your pick your battles, like yeah, all
Yeah.
these things help. It's about expectations because when you get let down over and over and over again, you just deteriorate, you just fall into a mess. Mhm.
What would be a word of, either advice or a thought that you would like to leave with a parent who's really in the thick of it right now and just doesn't see how they're gonna get through?
What I would say is do not listen to all those people who give you all those terrible statistics and 1 in 10 people beat this thing. That's ridiculous. I see people beat this thing every single day, even ones you would think, "Oh, this one's not gonna make it out." Like, sometimes those, it's severe enough that they actually recognize the problem. So, just don't get negative and don't listen to people who are negative and don't listen to the people who are just like, they're gonna have to hit this bottom or they have to run it for themselves. It's just because it makes you feel hopeless. And I see people beat this thing every day. Thousands, millions of people beat this thing. And the reason statistics look bad is because like, they go to treatment and they may relapse after that. But that person gets sober 2 years later. They're not counting that in the statistics.
Exactly,
It
exactly.
takes several tries, okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
that is always a beef I have because you can't
Mhm.
it's the hardest number to pin down, right? Because it's a moving target. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
when people tell you, I'm like, "Well, how did you get that number? How are you measuring it? Like,
Yeah.
who answered the phone and gave you the information?" I don't know, just like yeah, yeah.
Well, Amber, thank you so much. This was such a fun conversation. Loved it. And thank you so much for your work, all your videos. We just love them. I'll link in the show notes, obviously, to your program. And just tell me really quickly so that people know, because I think everybody knows you for your YouTube channel, but I don't know
Mhm.
if people know you have a counseling practice where you're actually working
Right.
with family members and with people who are struggling.
Yeah. Well, these days, even though I'm a counselor, my colleagues are counselors, we really just do coaching and consulting,
Okay.
because a lot of times what we do is families who are in this, they call us up, they say, "This is my situation. What do I say? What do I do?" And we really help. This really kind of really is just really a consulting coaching. So we do that. You can find us on our website, which is Family Recovery Academy online. But honestly, the best place to start is YouTube. There's
Yeah.
a million videos there. It's totally free. Start there.
It's amazing. I mean, I don't know how many do you even know how many videos you have up there?
It's more than 1,000. I know that.
It's
I haven't looked in a while,
crazy.
but
It's crazy. It's so amazing, and for every situation, so we'll link to those, and we definitely link to those in our community, and we're like, "Oh, yeah, though this one, you gotta watch that one." So, thank you for the work
thank
you put
you.
into the world. I appreciate it so much.
Same. Thank you, Renda.